In this episode, we're exploring one of the three life model pillars. Pillar 1, which is multi-generational community. We'll cover three things. First, what multi-generational community actually is. Second, what happens when clients don't have this. And third, how to apply this concept in your practice. If you're new here, I'm Monica with CFT Institute. We train therapists, counselors, and spiritual leaders in a framework approach that combines neuroscience with faith. So let's dive in. What is multi-generational community? Well, it's a good question. It really has to do with this idea of pulling together diverse age groups and having those age groups be in community with one another. It's really how the family structure is designed. We've got grandparents, sometimes great-grandparents, parents, and children all living in community with one another. But what's happening in our culture is no longer are families staying close to each other in these communities. Children move away from their parents, live across the country or across the world sometimes from their parents. So it's very common for children to grow up only with their parents and not their grandparents as a regular part of their life, or even their great-grandparents as a regular part of their life. And what's happening in that scenario, the problem is that children only have one layer of maturity to look to for their brain development. And that's problematic, as parents are oftentimes at work and children are spending time in daycare or at school with teachers that maybe they know for the year, but they don't know across the span of their life, or a span of multiple years. So their brain is not being developed and integrating this maturity because of attachment, long-term attachments in their lives. And it becomes problematic because there's a disenfranchising that's happening to children as they're growing up. And as a community, as a culture, it really is happening that people, children growing to teens, growing into adults, are really thinking more about themselves as an individual than they are thinking about themselves as a group. And really, our brain, neurobiologically, is designed to care more about who we are than it is designed to care more about who I am. You wouldn't know that, right? Based on especially how American culture is making it all about our individual profiles, our individual success, our individual grades, our individual profit and possessions. And then we're displaying that to the community as, look at me. And there's a lot of insecurity tied to that. It really has to do with, I want to belong to you. I want to belong to my community. So I'm going to show you that I'm worth it. I'm going to show you by the way I dress, by the way I do my hair, by the way I look, by the things I have, by the way I decorate things in my home or in my yard or in my business, that I'm worth belonging to. Because really what we all want is to belong in community. And so some tribal cultures actually do this so much better than here in America than we do with one another. Tribal cultures are living in community. They're accentuating what's already inborn in that grandparents and parents and children are just living and doing life together so that the developing brain is experiencing love and identity through this lens of belonging. So multi-generational community has to do with living life with diversity. There's all types of diversity. We've got age diversity, we have ethnic diversity, we have spiritual diversity. And we want to be able to live like that, because what happens in that setting, not only do we grow from brains that are more mature, but we also learn to tolerate differences, not just tolerate in terms of I'm putting up with you, but tolerate in terms of I love you. My attachment to you is stronger than our differences. And so then we're not going into this us and them mentality or enemy mode mentality. We can tolerate things and people and concepts that are different, and we can find our commonalities. We can find that we love one another despite and even because of our differences. We are appreciative of those differences and growing in our ability to be ourselves and invite others into belonging with us, even and especially because of the differences. And in Life Model, we call this the transformation zone because we're living together with people who are very different than us. Maybe their weaknesses are different than our strengths and our weaknesses are different than their strengths. So our brains can actually match and get models of that different level of maturity and grow. Because of that, that is what we call in LMIT and Life Model Informed Therapy, our growth point. That's our growth point because we can have tenderness to weakness because, as Life Model says, we are making relationship bigger than the problems we have. So we can grow in strength together because we love one another. And because of that, and because we're in community with one another and we're being challenged to keep relationship bigger than problems, we are having to grow spiritually in our relationship with God because God is the one who gives us his love in our hearts when we don't have it ourselves as humans. We are met with our own inability to love like God loves. And when we're met with that inability, we can step back and we can say, God, I'm not doing this right. And then the pride we have as a human that we're doing something, that we're making something happen melts away and humility comes in and vulnerability comes in. And then we are transformed into God's love as we attempt to live in community and love one another. So that's a brief overview of what multi-generational community is and why it's so important. So when clients come into our office as helping professionals and they don't have this type of community, maybe they're living alone in isolation, or maybe they have disenfranchised themselves from any diversity of relationship, whether that be family or community otherwise. They are living their life in like a silo, right? Where they're only getting the feedback and the extra input from those who are too like them, too similar. So they're not being challenged. And I think it's a real challenge to invite individuals, clients into community with us as their helping professional when they're experiencing such a narrow lens outside of our office. So the idea would be to first synchronize with them. The idea is to notice that they don't have this, to notice the loneliness, to notice the rigid thinking patterns, to notice the lack of ability to see the bigger picture of life, and just sit with it. Be curious about it. We don't have to judge it. Oftentimes, especially during political uprisings in culture, what I've noticed in the chatter online or in person with my fellow therapists is they have a lot to say about, I'm having such a hard time tolerating my client who has a different viewpoint than mine. And I believe Life Model really helps us understand that we don't want to push away these different viewpoints. Because if we can embrace our clients in their differences, then we are currently in the transformation zone. And that's what we want. Otherwise, as therapists, we're going to be in a silo with people who only believe and think and experience life the way we do. And then we lose our growth edge as therapists. So when clients don't have this, we don't need to pity them or put them down in our mind, or after they leave our office, shut the door and get on a call or get online and tell everybody how frustrated we are. What we want to do is think, this is the growth edge. This is where I can keep the person bigger than the problem. And I can adapt and change my own ways of thinking about people who are different than me so that I can stay compassionate, but also still grow myself in terms of my own narrative, my own belief systems. It's not about minimizing what we believe in our individual lives. Yes, we want to have our own values and our own beliefs and have our own narratives, our strong narrative about what we believe as therapists and what we know to be true. And the way that what we know to be true is strengthened in us is when we encounter clients or people in our personal communities who think and experience life differently than we do. And then we get to grow because we stay relational in those experiences. So when clients don't have this, we are not to push them away or to think, oh, I can't treat you. It's more about, oh, this is exciting. I recall one time in my own personal practice that a client reached out via, a marketing technique I was using and said, I'm not sure if we can work together because I think based on your faith background, because I do disclose that you might not agree with my lifestyle. And I quickly replied to this client and I said, I don't think this way at all. I would encourage and desire to work with you, even with our differences. And I'd love to try it out if you're willing. And so we were able to embark on a professional relationship that was very encouraging to me. And I hope to this client as well, as we were able to not focus on our differences as ways that were not going to bring us into connection, but we were able to focus on our differences in ways that were going to teach and grow one another, because we were able to develop a bond of mutual respect and compassion as we worked on her health, on her psychological and emotional health. So as we incorporate this concept of multi-generational community in our private practices, our agency practices, our spiritual practice, however we are embracing those who come to us, what we want to remember is people are more important than problems. The relationship we have with people is more important than the disagreements that we have. And that if we have something that comes up for us as helping professionals that triggers enemy mode, that triggers an us and them mentality, that's our growth point. That's where we want to dig in, focus in, and say, hey, I don't want that to keep me from loving someone. And that's where we dig in psychologically with our own helping professional that we hire for our own help, or with our relationship with God, or both, or with our belonging group that we have. And we say, hey, I'm really struggling in this area. And instead of gossiping or talking bad about the person who thinks differently, we go into this place of, I'm really struggling. I'm having trouble keeping the relationship bigger than the problem. And I need accountability around this. This is a confess your sins one to another type of situation where we can be healed and then show up relationally and allow these differences to actually challenge us rather than causing us to move away from the individual who's triggering all this in us. That is the transformation zone. That is how we grow. We grow in diversity. We grow in not having like-mindedness with someone, and then finding our commonality and finding that way of us having true compassion, true love, and really seeing that person through the lens of how God sees them, seeing what God sees in their life, seeing them as an individual who's worthy of love and belonging, and finding that inroad, that back channel to get into their mind and their heart, to show them the love of God through our actions, not just our words, and truly helping them adapt and become all God's created them to be, finding their true identity in the world. So this is what it's about, to live in multi-generational community, not viewing others as needy or less than or not enough or as problematic because of how it impacts our psyche to be with them, but viewing them as a person who is a unique creation of God, who has unique complications psychologically, and who is really a puzzle that we can work with God together to try to unpack and solve. So relationships are more important than problems, and people are not problems to solve, but people to love. So let's remember that as we consider this pillar and how to adapt it and incorporate it in our individual practices as helping professionals. So I've enjoyed this conversation today. It's been wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to go deeper with the life model and our 30 plus core concepts with LMIT, Life Model Informed Therapy, we have a full series of trainings available at cftinstitute.com. Check out our learning hub on that website. You can start exploring for free today. And remember this, healing spreads when counselors live in joy. We'll see you in the next episode.